This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome to the second episode in a podcast series on Open Wide Our Hearts, the 2018 Bishop's Pastoral Letter Addressing Racism. This is season 4 of our parish podcast, Viz on Main. Today's unedited episode is a recording of my conversation with a selection of Visitation parents who, as supporters of the Christo Rey internship program at Visitation School, are willing to discuss their responses to the Bishop's letter. I'm Lorraine Gordon, a member of the Faith Formation team and your host at Viz on Main. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask each of our participants to begin by briefly describing his or her connection to Visitation Parish and the school. And I will start with Molly.
Thank you, Lorraine. My name is Molly Hughes, and I'm here with my husband, Scott. And we have a third grader, Oliver, and a kindergartner, Emmett. And we are, thrilled to be at Viz, and it's a, place that has our hearts. And so we're very thankful to be part of this podcast and this discussion this evening. So.
Great. Cassie, can I move to you?
Yes, absolutely. My name is Cassie Flanagan, and my husband, Sean Flanagan, who couldn't be here. We have 2 kiddos in Visitation, our oldest in 4th, and then a 2nd grader. And then not this coming year, but the year after, we'll have a kindergartner as well. I am not an alumni of Visitation, but my husband is, and we as well are very happy to be a part of this community and very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Great, great. Brad and Katie, do you want to speak?
Sure. My name is Brad Taylor, and my wife, Katie, is here with me. We have 3 kids at Visitation, Peter, Luke, and Cora. Peter's in 5th grade, Luke is in 3rd, and Cora is in 1st grade. Although we're not alums at Visitation as far as us personally, we did grow up in the greater Kansas City area, Katie in Kansas City itself, and myself in most of Eastern Jackson County growing up in the Catholic school system. So we're happy to be at Visitation and excited to be part of the group.
John?
Yeah, my name is John McGurk. My wife Katie and I have 2 boys at Visitation, 1 in 3rd, Jack, and 1 in 1st, Finnegan. And we have a 11-month-old little girl, Emmy Lou, who will start in a few years, I suppose. I'm a proud alumni of St. Thomas More in South Kansas City. And kind of really, I wanted to come to Visitation to bring, my knowledge of numerous CYO city championships at parochial league athletics to Visitation, and really kind of just build that winning attitude at Visitation moving forward.
The audience is unaware. There's quite a bit of laughter occurring on audio.
I asked Lorraine about editing, and she said it was just uncut. So it's yeah.
Fine. That's fine. We'll keep that in mind, John, when we call on you. Okay. Hey, Linda, I would like for you to introduce yourself as well to the listening audience.
Sure. Thank you, Lorraine. My name is Linda Hughes. I have 2 kiddos that are graduates of Visitation, currently in high school. And then my son, Archer, is in 6th grade. I've been a part of the Visitation community since my husband, Jim, and I moved to Kansas City in 2004. And have been blessed to be able to work at Visitation. And now I'm working as the co-chair of the Racial Justice Committee. And I'm looking forward to the conversation this evening.
You all for introducing yourselves to our audience. I want to spend a moment reflecting on a quote from Open Wide Our Hearts at a point in the letter. Actually, it's very close to the end of the letter, where the bishops are offering some action steps for all Catholics to consider in combating racism. So here's the quote. As Catholics, our individual efforts to encounter, grow, witness, change our hearts about racism must also find their way into our families. We can provide experiences for our children that expose them to different cultures and peoples. We ask all our faithful to consider ways in which they and their families can witness through an understanding and commitment to the equal dignity of each person. guidance counsel from the bishops, I'd like to move on to the questions I want to pose to tonight's guests. And I want to begin by asking the question, as you read Open Wide Our Hearts, what 2 or 3 passages stood out to you? And I think I'm going to start that conversation with Brad.
Thank you, Lorraine. Sorry, I think there was feedback there. Getting that. So I think that the couple passages that stood out to me were, I believe if I'm getting the titles right, they're being open to encounters and new relationships, as well as I think the immediately subsequent, which was resolving to work for justice. And I think those stood out to me, just keeping in mind kind of a focus of what's bringing us here together and the Christo Rey project. But as you know, especially in the time of COVID and isolation, as well as just our general, or at least, you know, me personally, to be surrounded by individuals I typically interact with. It's a challenge to branch out and make an effort to interact and expand our minds and our horizons to meet new people, and especially those who may benefit from new interactions, including ourselves. And this kind of probably bleeds into one of the other questions a little bit, but that was a goal, I think, for, you know, our participation with the Christo Rey program. You know, not only giving, you know, others an opportunity to interact with new individuals, but also bringing and exposing our own children to other people that they may not have that interaction with without us taking an effort and, you know, purposefully engaging in new activities and helping facilitate and foster those relationships.
Well, it's really interesting that the letters seem to resonate with your experience and your aspiration as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Katie, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure.
In terms of passages that moved you or struck you as kind of important?
Yep. I think the primary one that really struck me was the comment on our commitment to life. And when we think about that in respect to our children and the finite time frame we have with them, to encourage them to respect life in a variety of ways. And the passage that struck me the most was, you know, the comment about the injustice and harm racism causes are an attack on human life. And it's not a secret that these attacks on human life are severely affected in terms of people of color disproportionately. And I think it's important that our kids have some control over their responses within their community and how they interact with other people, more so than some of the other factors of respect for life that are focused on within the Catholic Church. And I think that really resonated with me more so than anything, because we can teach our children respect for life in a variety of ways, and racism translates across all avenues.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Cassie, you're kind of nodding your head. That's a dangerous thing to do on video.
It is. I knew I was going to get called on next. But both Brad and Katie, I mean, I agree with everything that you guys are saying. And Brad, you had mentioned that being open to encounter a new relationship, that section really stuck out to you, and it did for me as well in a variety of ways. But I do really like the quote from Pope Francis. If we have received the love which restores meaning to our lives, how can we fail to share that love with others? And I think as complex as all of this is, and you know, the factors of media and politics that play into how we think and feel about all of these issues, I think the bottom line is, I think that many of us here today are very blessed in many ways, and we have received that love, and to carry that forward and show that in any way possible, specifically as it relates to racism and approaching that and learning about that and meeting people, being open to relationship, being open to encounter new experiences and people that, perhaps we've not had common shared backgrounds with, and what we can get from that. And just like the bottom line of relationship and love and learning from others and being open to other people's experiences, I think is at the core for me of addressing all of these other issues that result from that, is meeting people where they're at. And so that really stuck out to me.
Okay, thanks, Cassie. John or Molly, do you have anything you would like to share in terms of a passage or two that resonated with you?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I totally agree with Katie on the life issue, and we seem to be singularly focused a lot on that. And I think that highlighted that, this is very much in that same conversation. And then there was one passage that really, I love Pope Francis, and like, he's the one that brought me back to the church. And there's a quote from him in there that said, think of this as an invitation not meant for him. Think that this invitation is not meant for him or her. All of us need of personal ongoing conversion. And to me, it's like, sometimes in the world today, like, we live in a righteousness where, we're holier than thou or righteous than everybody, but we always need to remember that nobody's perfect. And there was another quote later in the document that said that, the redemption of one's soul in heaven is sometimes greater than 99 that lived, perfect lives. I'm summarizing and paraphrasing there, but, I think it's important for everybody to know that no one's perfect. You can recognize that, you probably have done stuff in your past that you're not proud of, or said things. Doesn't mean you can't be better. And that kind of resonated for me pretty greatly.
Molly, do you want to share anything, or should we move on to the next question?
We can move on. I'm seeing the clock ticking. Go ahead and we can move
That's
on.
okay. Don't worry about it. It's the quality of the conversation that counts here. Okay, so I will move on to the next one. As you read the letter, did anything challenge you? And if so, what challenged you? So maybe I begin with Cassie on that.
Yeah, so there wasn't something specific that stuck out to me as a challenge, but I think more globally, and it goes back to that complexity that I alluded to earlier. There are so many details, and there's so much information, and there's so much out there in the media, when you watch TV, on social media, and it can get overwhelming and almost paralyzing, to the sense that you just feel defeated. Like, how am I going to tackle this? So that is, I think, reflective of the challenge that I've experienced over the past 2 years with the pandemic, and all of the division that we've seen in our society as of late. And it all goes back to, I think, when I get so paralyzed with complexity, my default is to go to, well, let's make this simple again. What can you do? And it does go back to loving thy neighbor, making relationship, connection, and in the small moments of life, in the people that I speak with, encounter professionally or on a day-to-day basis personally, how can I learn from them and listen to them, as opposed to being overwhelmed with all of the details? I always think about how complex relationship is. I think about my own marriage, or the people that I live in with my house currently. We oftentimes misunderstand each other. I feel misunderstood often. And if we're living this shared experience with people and we're misunderstanding and not feeling heard at times, we're never going to fully be able to understand the breadth of anybody else's experience. But to take time and space to meet people where they're at, I think is the big takeaway from that challenge. Is I don't want to overcomplicate it. I don't want to get caught in the details. I want to connect with another human in another moment. And I think that's where I'm going to probably have the greatest impact at this point in time in my life, and where I'm going to learn the most.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to talk about if there were things that the letter stated, or insights that challenged you as you read it?
I just want to highlight a
This is
bit.
Molly. This is Molly.
This is Molly. Yes. Hi. There was a bit in the letter talking about, sort of dismissing other people's experiences, dismissing, sort of, things that maybe we're not burdened with, is like, I often say we are a privileged community, and more than that, we're just like a privileged group of white folks, and so it's easy for us to not, flip the coin and see the other side. There's this whole other, world out there outside of visitation, outside of our little beautiful bubble. And, just being open to even seeing that other side of the coin, let alone, dismissing what other people could perceive as racism or injustices and all these sorts of things, is just, just like the tip of the iceberg, for anything, pertinent to, our community. So, I don't know, that kind of struck me as, like, oh yeah, there's the dismissiveness piece of it that kind of makes me unsettled.
This is Scott, Molly's husband. But what I tacking onto that, right? It's only, being nice is one part of it, but understanding the other's experience and the history, and that to me was an interesting, part of the letter. And I think that's a part, I struggle with to kind of ground myself in and think that's an important part of, the reconciliation, or, what have you, with experiences, past injustices, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's right that understanding their perspective, understanding what's happened and how that might shape their current perspective. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was struck by two major themes. One is to listen to people's experiences and to learn about those experiences. So I think, you articulated that really well. Does anyone else want to talk about a challenge?
Lorraine, I don't know if this is John. I don't know if this really kind of is going to your question, but one thing that, as I read this, part of me like wanted to be like, okay, when are they going to acknowledge the past sins of the church? When are they going to say that they contributed to this? And they got to it. So I was happy they did. I thought maybe it could have gone further. But that was one thing that stuck out to me. They talked about a bunch of, and then I was like, man, they gotta talk about what the church has contributed to this whole situation. And they got there, and I was happy. I felt like they could have gone further, but that was one thing that really stuck out to me was, it seemed to come late, and it didn't seem to be a ton in there. I thought it was good that they acknowledged it, but that was just something that it's hard to describe. I was disappointed and happy all at the same time.
Well, it seemed like you were anticipating. You kept waiting, right? And then finally there was something articulated. I believe they talk, as much as they talk about the clergy, for example, who were attentive to African Americans and to Native Americans. They also talk about the bishops who did not oppose slavery, and who actually, some of them, some of the clergy owned slaves in the past.
Well, and they actually taught me something in that, a pope in the 1400s actually gave his blessing to the slave trade. It actually was even more deep rooted than I thought. So it was actually, they taught me something in that regard that I did not know about the church. But yeah, I'd agree. It was, they did talk about it a lot, so that was good.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, after reading this letter, do you feel inspired or maybe even compelled to act? And if so, what form is that action going to take?
Yep, this is Katie.
Yeah.
I think I can start with that one. So, I think probably the most important thing is just inspiring us to look at our family and just daily activities, whether that's subconscious or conscious, to recognize that this isn't a one-time event, a one-class event, a one discussion event. It's how we present ourselves to our children, how we interact with our community on a day-to-day basis. And that resonates with our kids. And also there was a passage about changing structures. And the quote was, "We cannot accomplish this task alone." that we call on everybody, especially all Christians and those of other faith formations, to help in this endeavor. So being active participants in that effort as parents within our school community to really help to incorporate that common thread of racial justice. I think Visitation's doing a really nice job, even with just things like this podcast, to kind of get the word out that this is a very important topic in our society, and something that's, exceedingly helpful for our children to learn about at a very young age. And so how can we carry that through just our day in, day out? I think that was probably the most inspiring thing, as to how can we do that as parents.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Katie. Anyone else want to talk about what you envision as an action step that you can take, having read this letter?
This is Molly again. I feel, I keep looking at the what I perceive to be a little bit of the elephant in the room, and kind of going back to the fact that we're just kind of like a community of like white bread America. I'm like, we're having this conversation, and there's nobody of color on this discussion. And so I'm just like, oh, isn't this a little bit in and of itself perpetuating just a skosh of the problem? I think this is a move in the right direction and that sort of thing, but it's like, I think we're missing an incredible perspective here, and it's not like we have a ton to choose from, if we're just selecting from the Viz community, but, I just can't help but not, bring that, to the forefront of the conversation a little bit,
Well, Molly, and this is John. Something I always think about is we think about, our parish is middle class, upper class white people.
Yep.
And you look at why that, and you're like, well, why aren't we? Well, it's like, look at the boundaries of the parish, and a lot of that goes to the history of Kansas City, but it's like that is the boundaries of our parish in Kansas City. And it's like, I think we go to Oak or maybe a little bit further east, and that's the reality. And it's like I think that's part of the problem, and then you look at kind of the more historically African-American churches on the east side that, Emmett Pearson, who's on the Racial Justice Committee with us, talks a lot about this because he's a Viz grad, but grew up on the east side. And it's, those parishes have a lot of hurt feelings for how things have gone down in this city. Yet we still live in these kind of, our parish is from this street to this street, and segregated Kansas City, that's still who we have in our parish.
Totally.
I may be going down a whole different rabbit hole. Sorry, Lorraine.
That's okay. No,
No, that's totally legitimate. I think it came up certainly in our conversation last week for the first episode, sorry. And, how does one, it's not just a matter of changing dynamics in a small, confined, group of people like a parish. It has to do with neighborhoods. It has to do with communities. It has to do with the city itself, right?
Sure.
And I know, Cassie, you opted for simplicity, but it gets complex when
and that's where it almost, and again, this is Cassie speaking, and that's where it becomes paralyzing to me. I'm like, I see that the biggest consideration of not sending our kids to Viz was the lack of diversity, because I think it's so incredibly important to have natural interaction that's day to day, that's not forced, that's not a thing, that's not an event, that's just an integral part of relationship in that day to day. We still chose Visitation because it offers so much for our children, and we don't regret that decision at all. But again, it's those structural things that I am in no place to make changes. Although I see the change that needs to happen in order to get that, wanted outcome. But that's where I become so paralyzed, because I'm like, I can't make those changes. So I get so overwhelmed that I'm like, okay, well, what can I do in the day-to-day? And to Katie's point, what can I do in the day-to-day with my kids in those actions? How do I bring that to my kids when they perhaps aren't getting the diversity in their schooling? And I keep getting a lot of question marks in my head, but it comes back to, let me focus on who we are interacting with. who we do see on a day-to-day basis, and how do we become more relationship oriented and learn more about people that we interact with, again, on that day-to-day basis. This is the biggest thing for me, so I'm so happy it was brought up.
Cassie, we were in the same boat. So sorry to interrupt. We were in the same boat on visitation. This is Scott again. You know, we that was our hesitation as well. You know, we lived outside of the States for a while, and that actually, we kind of stumbled into it, but that changed our experience a little bit too, and how we relate with people. And I think we came back and we're like, wait a minute, you know, we're back into this. So now you're right. I mean, it's almost, and you have to, we're trying to be deliberate about it in some ways, and be almost kind of curate opportunities for our kids to you know, get that, whether it's, you know, trying to use, you know, foreign language or use something like that in a way that kind of relates with people in a way that they might not normally do. But yeah, it's a struggle for us as well. I think you brought up a really good point.
Well,
Yeah,
I
this is
guess,
John, we actually sent Jack to a different kindergarten, frankly, for that reason. And it just wasn't a good fit at the end of the day for other reasons. And we're super happy we're at Visitation. It's great, but that was the overriding decision in my mind. Was I wanted my kids to go to a school that reflected the world in which they were going to live and work and hopefully be leaders in. And the reality is we have to find that elsewhere now, because we don't really have that at Visitation.
well, I think this is a point where I'd like to bring Linda in, because Linda is involved with a project that involves having kids from different communities come together. Linda, you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing?
Sure, Lorraine, thanks. Well, as part of the Racial Justice Committee, we have formed a group that we're calling Youth for Change. And right now it's open to students 6th grade through 12th grade. And we're partnering with St. Monica's Parish. They don't have a school, but they have an active youth group. And so we've had a couple meetings so far. And, you know, really the mission of this group is to bring kids together to do service with one another, just to build relationships and see the common good that can come from working together and collaborating together. And the first couple, or we've had one meeting so far, and it was pretty amazing, just kind of watching the kids and seeing what comes of it. And really, I think to your point about, you know, what can I do? What little things can I do? I kind of see the title of this letter as inspiring, you know, that we are to open our hearts wider to the possibilities of what Visitation can be, and what we'd hope it to be. You know, we are a parish school, but we have a committed parent population. And so we can become what we hope for. And I think your voices are important. So I encourage you to continue to let these desires be known, that, you know, we can grow and build. You know, saying this as a former employee, not currently employed by Visitation, but I do believe very strongly that we can make a difference. We have the capacity to do so in and what we hope for, and what we feel brave in doing and asking for.
Right, thank you. I thought that would be encouraging for these parents to hear that ongoing work that you're doing with basically kids from 6th through 12th grade. So I'd like to move on, if I could, to the question that kind of, there's a common denominator that you all share, and that is the support of the Christo Rey intern program. So I'm going to start with John, who can sort of, you know, because he was helpful in getting this started, just sort of give anyone listening who's not familiar with the program what it involves. And then I'd like all of you to kind of share with us why you're supporting it. So John, I'm going to let you start.
Yeah, so, you know, some people probably know a lot about Christo Rey that are listening, and some people may not know anything, but Christo Rey is a Catholic work-study program high school over at the old Redemptorist school off of Linwood. It is, the kids go to school, they work one day out of the week to supplement or fund the cost of the school or their tuition. And, you know, those are, they then go out and find partners, companies. Visitation is one of those now, that will then help fund and pay those students that then goes towards their education. It is predominantly students of color. It is a high Hispanic population and African American. And, you know, coming from the east side, most of the kids come from, you know, poverty level type households. But the kids are amazing. And I think anybody that's interacted with the students we have at Visitation can see that these are kids who themselves and their parents have taken the time and effort to get them into this program. And I think their college acceptance rate is almost 100%. It's just an outstanding program. I know Christo Rey had been at Visitation in the past, early on when the school was just getting started on kind of the school wasn't paying for it at that time, and they've moved to try and get to help the school frankly survive, trying to get more people to pay. So, you know, what Cassie said earlier actually kind of struck me. It's kind of like, I come into stuff and I'm one of those people, I want to find a big solution and just go right away. And sometimes like I can be a bull in the china shop, and maybe that rubs some people the wrong way, and that's fine. I'm not gonna cry about it. But you know, one thing was, well, what can we do? To Cassie's point, what can we do to try and expose our kids to the world that they're gonna grow up and work in and live in? And you know, Matt Gunter and some other people on the committee, you know, had a lot of experience. I was on the jobs committee at Christo Rey. I had experience with them, and that was one thing that came up was like, well, we should just, you know, this is easy. We think you know, the school could use some help in their early years. And why don't we try and raise some money to get some Christo Rey kids there? And, you know, we did it, and the school was abundantly thankful. But the reality is, I think we get more out of the program than probably they are getting. You know, I think the students are very thankful and they're great, but for our kids to come around and see some people that don't look like them, that don't come from the same circumstances as them, I think, at least for my boys, extremely powerful, and I think it'll serve them well as they grow. Now, is it all we need to do? Absolutely not. But to Cassie's point, it's what we can do right now. It's the small thing that I think will have big impact in our kids' lives. So that's kind of the background on it. You know, I think it's been successful. I think Ms. Hess talks about it a lot, about how great it's been to have those students there. She's the one that interacts with them the most, I think. Linda can correct me if that's wrong, but so yeah, I think it's been awesome. And you know, we raised the money in frankly a matter of days or weeks. The outpouring we had from the parish, not just parents, but people who probably had kids or no kids in the school years and years ago, it was great. And you know, hopefully we can just keep this sustained and build on it and continue to do more things around that.
Okay, I'd like the other parents to talk about why they're supporting the program.
Yep, this is Katie. I can speak to our reason. So I actually grew up over in Northeast Kansas City, and I went to grade school K through 8 at St. Stephen's, which is certainly an inner city school. And I was surrounded by a very diverse population. My best friends, my teachers, my mentors, Spanish speaking kids in my class were as common for that to be their first language as English speaking. So, you know, this opportunity of offering from Christo Rey to come into our school and be a part of our kids' lives, I was definitely impressed and grateful for, because it's hard to explain to my children, you know, my background and my history and where I grew up from and, you know, who I was surrounded by. And so I think it's very unique, and it's definitely the work life I live in now. I work in a hospital. I'm surrounded by a variety of people, and it is exactly, you know, the life I grew up living. And I'm fortunate to have that ever since I was in kindergarten. So I think it's a huge benefit. And I, you know kids who go to Christo Rey and parents who send their kids there and who are eternally grateful for an organization like that, who are still, friends with my grandma from church over at St. Anthony's. So I think it's an amazing organization, and we're fortunate to have it in our community.
Okay, Cassie, would you like to share why you're supporting it?
I actually have to give the credit to my husband, Sean. Right when we moved back to Kansas City, his hometown, not mine, we went to a Christo Rey fundraiser where there was a great presentation. John, you probably were the one giving it, in all honesty. And we heard so many phenomenal stories of the students. And I left feeling just how John described. Like I wasn't even in the day-to-day of it, but I was like, I felt full of life, and I felt like I was getting something more out of it. So to support something like that, that in essence is going to make our society greater, is a no-brainer. And then selfishly, do I benefit from it too because of the interactions that I get and potentially our kids get? I just think it's a fantastic way to, again, answer that question of what can we do? And again, no brainer for something to support something like this.
Okay, Molly?
Scott touched on this a skosh, but we lived out of the country for a couple years, and frankly, we love Latinos. That kosher to say? We live in South America, and I mean, we just, it really opened our eyes, and I mean, just to the world, and I mean, we're pretty, avid travelers, and we just know there's so much more out there, and so it's like bringing, this is, such a small step in the right direction of just like, yeah, exposing our kids to like the real world, right? Not just like the 64113 zip code, to like what it really looks like, so, and that's important for us. That's meaningful for us. It's, it changed who we are for the better, having a broader horizon, a broader, lens. And we want that for our kids, of course.
Yeah, just tacking onto that, Scott, again, growing up in whatever bubble you grew up in, right? You know things a certain way. And I guess to me, it's the fundamental kind of, element of diversity, even above the human one, right? I mean, it's just, you find your better self. Everybody's going to bring something else to the table. Everybody's perception's a little different.
Yeah.
And the broader pool that you see people, the more well-rounded and I guess the better humans we all become. And I think that's important. And so whatever we can do to increase our knowledge of other, other people's shoes, and, hear the things that we like. And it's not, the way that I grew up doing things isn't perfect. The way that anyone else grew up doing things isn't perfect. So, merging together, we give the opportunity to find a better, kind of version going forward. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate I appreciate the interaction you're having with each other as well, even though this is a Zoom call where we're sort of staring at each other's faces. I think that, it is a step, clearly, but it's not the last step, and there are more steps to take. I think that's pretty much a uniform feeling among the group of you, that there are more things to do. And I think we need to take, Linda's advice to keep thinking of ways that the school becomes the kind of environment that you clearly want your children to be, immersed in. And it's just really encouraging to hear how much commitment you all have to this. I think we've sort of come to the conclusion of the second episode on Open Wide Our Hearts, and we hope you'll join us for the next episode, in which I will be talking with young adult visitation parishioners. I want to thank Katie, Brad, Cassie, Molly, John, and Linda for participating tonight. The Faith Formation team would love your feedback on this and other episodes, so please feel free to leave a comment. Thank you.